today's video is going to be basically about Jesus Christ and his past lives. Now, a lot of people, a lot of Christians, or anybody that would tune into this video without an open mind would say, well, I don't believe in reincarnation, but this is metaphysics and this is my perspective, and that's what we're going to be talking about. That's what I'm going to be teaching and addressing. And I have a lot of information and notes that I gathered, so I will be looking at my phone. So I'll try to get through it as quickly as possible. And I'll probably pause the video and then find my place and then continue. So something I want to address is that this is something I've known coming up in a family that was very Christian-minded, Christian-oriented. They never really asked any questions, and if they did it way before I was born, because I'm the youngest. But they have what I call well, not what I call, but it's called cognitive dissonance, where you can't. They're basically programmed to the point that you can't give them any new information. They're fixed in their beliefs and their views, and that's it. And when you're like that in life, most of the time you end up believing that you already know everything and you can't learn anything else. And when you're like that, you're in your ego and you're arrogant, and you are basically can't be taught. And if you're one of those people that think that way and believe that way, like you don't need to know anything else, and you can't learn anything else, then you need to get some help, because there's so much knowledge out there, and it's infinite. It's infinity on multiple levels. Like, if we were to know everything possible, like, and I don't just mean knowledge in general, I'm talking about like truthful information, we would spontaneously combust, because everything is energy, and we wouldn't be able to hold that in this flesh and into these physical bodies. So there's a lot of information out there. I'm going to be sharing it, and this is something, when I first went through my awakening, my spiritual awakening, it's something that just resonated with me on so many levels. And most of my information comes from Edgar Casey's readings, because, and you've heard me say this, and you'll continue to hear me say this, because that is the most profound information that I've ever found on any of these topics that I was raised into. And it's sad, because I'm basically the only one in my family that even gives a damn about any of it. People are just so fixated on what they believe and don't even understand what it all means. From my perspective, Christians, or Christianity in itself, is a religion built around the Master Jesus Christ, and he did not ask to be worshipped. This is not something he requested in any of his information that's out there that's floating around. This is something that they did. And really what the whole idea, and this is basically from Casey's readings, and I will give a little information on Edgar Casey. So Edgar Casey was basically a psychic that would go into a self-induced trance, self-induced hypnosis, and he learned how to do that through a traveling, I think it was a guy in a carnival, like he had come down with something that couldn't speak, so the guy in the carnival showed him how to go into a state of hypnosis, and he found in that state of hypnosis that he was able to give the cure, the reasoning, the root cause behind what was causing his ailment. And that's profound, for you to go into a state of hypnosis and give your own diagnosis and it actually work. So being that he was able to do that, he started doing health readings at first. And something I want to mention too is Casey was a Pisces. He was actually born on had the same, not the same date, but the same actual birthday as my mom. So I never got to express very much when she was living. I never got to express very much with her. I had like a conversation before she died about some of this, and I remember her eyes just being real big. She was really interested, and I wish that we could have bonded in that way earlier in life. That's a regret I have, but it's still part of my journey, part of my story, and it's one reason I am so passionate about teaching this stuff. So, being a Pisces, that's a water element, and Pisces is very conducive or conductive to energy. So, and what do I mean by that? Conducive or conductive. So, a conductor is basically something that can channel energy through it. We are conductors. Every time we have an idea, or if you see this person that's, an example, you see this person that's broke, and he comes up with this $1 million idea, and then he ends up being, wealthy and famous. That's because he was in alignment with his source, with his God, with his information, and he got this idea, and it was meant to aid humanity, service to others, and then that's why it happened for them. And if you notice, the most successful people in the world, or the most, people that have actually done good for everyone, are always service to others. They're basically taking their creation, or their ideas, or their talent, God-given talent, and they're sharing it with the world, and that's part of what it means to be Christ-like and to achieve Christhood. So, in my way, I'm doing that now because I'm sharing this information that, may be lost because people that are jumping into metaphysics and astrology and things like that now, they try to learn a lot of their information on TikTok, which, I'm on TikTok myself, but, you can't really teach a whole lot of things in a minute, or 60 seconds, or if you overlap the videos and you can actually get it up to 3 minutes, you can't really learn a whole lot, and people don't want to. Everything is just fast. It's all about gratification, everything moving forward. I want it now, I want to learn it now, let's move on to the next thing. And I remember I had a book on Edgar Casey, and I let my sister read it. She's one of these people that are fixed, is fixed in her views, and she just, without really telling, when I was excited for her to read it, and get it, I didn't get the reaction that I thought I would, because I figured that she would walk away with her eyes wide open and go, wow, it helped me out so much. What I got was, it was very repetitive. And so imagine my disappointment in that, because if you can take a book like the Book of Revelation is what I'm talking about, Edgar Casey's viewpoint on that, if you can take that and that's all you get out of it, what that tells me is that you're a speed reader, that you get bored with things easy, and that you basically have a TikTok mindset. You want it now, and that's it, and you're not really going to learn anything if you don't put your energy into it. Now, some people are not supposed to do that because they're fixed, fixed mentally, and are, supposed to kind of stay the same, and that's fine. We'll all get there when we're supposed to. But me, I've always had this passion to share what I've learned with people, and that's why I'm on there teaching in the best way I can, and hopefully I will be able to, teach more things to people, and that, this feels like, part of my purpose. I'm passionate about it. It's what gets me up in the morning. So regardless of how well I do, this is something that I'm going to plan on sticking with. So when I say conductor, and I'm talking about the water element. So an example of that also would be, think of a live wire, like a downed power line, and they call that, interestingly enough, they call that a live wire. Now, follow me as I take you to this journey so you can understand what I'm saying. All right, so what happens when it's, if there's a down power line on the road and there's water near it? It's dangerous, right? Because if you stand in the water, you could get fried or you could be electrocuted, which normally that's probably what's going to happen. I say that it would probably happen because, it's not really up to us. If that's the way we're supposed to go, that's the way we're supposed to go. But it's amplified. So when you take a water sign, or someone that has a lot of water, or the emphasis on it, in their astrological chart, they have more of the water element or the placement, they would be highly conducive or conductive. And so they would be able to channel more energy. And, for those that don't know, astrologically speaking, what those signs would be that are governed by the water element, that is Scorpio, Pisces, and Cancer. And we all, in our charts, we all have a whole lot of these elements within us. You'd have to do an astrological birth chart, which I do those. If you're interested, just, the information will be in the description box. Just contact me if you're interested in getting one. I do those for $20, and I paid a lot for the program, so it's a really substantial report, and you will learn a lot about yourself and your mission and your life and everything, you know, in regards to that. So when you have that water element like that, you know, Pisces are basically ruled by Neptune, and they as long as they keep themselves pure and clean, they can really connect to source. And Neptune is supposed to be, as far as the planets go, that's what they're governed by. So they are actually closer to God than any of us because of the water element. Now, the whole thing about the past lives and Jesus, the idea behind this, and this is why it resonates with me so much, is when you think about, if you believe the concept, like that Christianity teaches us that, you know, we only can do this one lifetime, we got one life to live, and yes, in this, you know, and my response is yes, in this body, but we are not this body. We are a soul, we are an essence. So that's why when you hear these terms, they sold their soul for riches and fame, it's impossible to sell what you are because you are a soul. The body is just a housing. It is a vessel. It is a temple, you know. And they talk about that you're supposed to keep your temple clean and pure and holy, and that's what it means, is, you know, through energy work or through meditation and prayer, to keep yourself, you know, just like they say cleanliness is next to godliness. It's about keeping yourself pure. But if you're over snacking on, you know, fast food all the time and all these chemicals and all that, you're going to walk around and you're going to be in your ego and you're not going to know a lot of things. And trust me when I say purifying the body, I've done this, and I'm getting back to that now because I did have I kind of got off of my path for a long time. But by keeping the mind clear, you know, you really are more connected and have more insight. So when you're over, you know, putting drugs in your body, even weed, a lot of people will not agree with that. They think that they're more profound and more creative on weed, and yes, they are. But for me, and, you know, some people can actually, you know, they're fine with that. But for me, it dumbs me down. It blocks a lot of my connections to source, to God, the universe, and I'm so much more amplified and, you know, and have more profound information, prophecies, messages come through when I am clean and pure. So I do my best to do that. But there was a time where I was much more pure, and I was like that, you know, like Casey, not to that level, because I mean, if I was going to set my sights high to be, you know, to mold myself into a way of being something, it would be kind of like that, because in order to connect the way that he did, that's a whole nother level of connection. And, you know, he wasn't even conscious. That's the thing. He was just a vessel. He was basically setting his consciousness aside, or his essence aside, and letting something of a much greater magnitude come through him. And a lot of, you know, I've read reports and a lot of Christians, and I'm not downing Christians, I'm just saying that these are the perspectives that I have encountered along my studies of Edgar Casey. As they say, he was channeling demons and blah, 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 and it's all lies. Well, I can tell you right now that my body was pure. I was living, I wasn't tainted. I was, you know, putting the best foods, organic foods in my body, meditating constantly, and this stuff has always resonated with me on a soul level. And I know the difference between just believing what you read and actually knowing. There's a difference between believing what someone tells you and being gullible, as opposed to you knowing, having that inner knowing. That's called claircognizance. That's where you have the inner knowing. You receive downloads yourself. And the reason it resonates is because I get similar information. You know, I've lived past lives, you know, my soul, I'm more connected to my soul than a lot of people are. And that's the whole idea behind the Christhood, is you are a man or a woman eventually finding or becoming conscious of the fact that you are Christ, and that you have all these levels throughout these lifetimes that you basically go up. You know, and it's kind of like in the Egyptians talk about it being the capstone. So if you look at, for example, if you look at the Great Pyramid, that's, that could be seen as a levels that we're climbing throughout different lifetimes till we reach the, top of the capstone. And then that basically is a representation of when you have achieved, your Christhood or your Christ essence or Christ consciousness. Now, again, what kind of sense would it make? The church would lead you to believe that you have only one lifetime to get it right, and if you don't, you go to heaven or hell. And it makes no sense whatsoever. For me, heaven and hell are right here on earth. It's a state of consciousness. It's a state of, it's a vibration, a frequency that you're living. It's easily to shift back and forth. If you're in your lower animal nature and you're, engulfed with drugs and sex and money and you're all materialistic and there's not a balance between your lower self and your higher self, then you are basically living in the imagery of the devil, Lucifer, or that vibration and frequency. And so bad things are going to happen to you. If you are someone that's just lustful and greedy, then those things are going to happen to you. And me, I'm not that way. I try to achieve balance. I'm not about this love and light stuff. Although love is the answer, it's not just about love and light. It's about yin and yang. It's dark and it's light and dark. It's a balance between those. And to me, that's also what the twin flame journey represents. It's the higher self and lower self merging into oneness, into balance, into harmony. The mind is duality. The heart is oneness. So the whole idea is basically, when you think about the Trinity, it is the left and right hemispheres of the brain basically merging with the heart, and that's the Trinity. That's 3 levels. It's the threefold flame. And I don't want to make this about me. It's more about just an example of what we can attain and where we can go. And so, just like all men, none of us are perfect, but the whole idea is to become perfect when we achieve oneness with God, and that is perfection, the oneness factor. When they say we're imperfect, to me that's the biggest lie, because we'll eventually become that. We're perfect just how we are. We should. The whole idea, though, is not to just attain it and be selfish with it. Is to basically attain that and then broadcast that and live that and show that to the world. Me, I'm much more of a hermit because I've found there's so much darkness and so much enviness and so much gratification, self-gratification in this world. It's so much easier for me to just separate from my society, by myself, and kind of live like a hermit and learn this information and attain it that way, as opposed to trying to keep my peace out into this world, because this world can be so hard sometimes, But it is through those hardships that have made, that I've gained my strength. And so I'm the type now, as far as like boundaries and stuff, I set boundaries, and I give you, just a few chances. And if you don't get it, if you don't understand it, then I will see you later. I will see you in the next lifetime, because I'm not going to sit here and be the type of person that just stays in those lower vibrations because other people are connected to me. I would rather live my life in complete solitude than have to live around all that chaos and darkness, because people are not balanced within themselves. I don't resonate with that anymore. So I'm a far cry from who I used to be. But so anyway, when it comes to the lives of Jesus Christ, it makes perfect sense if you really listen. In Edgar Casey readings, and one reason you should listen to me in this information is because this is a guy that predicted his own death. He predicted both World War I and World War II. There were so many things he predicted. That the Dead Sea Scrolls would be found, and that's actually where the Book of Enoch comes from. So he did, equivalent to 14,000 and something readings. Most of them were all correct. The ones that weren't were basically possible or potential prophecies that it came through. And he actually even stated, a lot of people will make videos and say, well, because this didn't happen, he wasn't legit. Well, he actually stated that our consciousness, if it evolved and changed, that it would change these potential prophecies. And that's what a prophecy is. It's a probability of something that is foreseen to happen in the current state or the current vibration or frequency of everything that's happening. So what I'm saying is, if at the time when he got this information, the way the world was going at that time, that's when and how it would occur. But because we altered our consciousness, more light came in, it changed it changed the timelines. And so there was many things that didn't occur because we actually evolved during those times and changed the course of history. So, but anyway, I'm gonna get on with the lives of Jesus Christ. And I'm just gonna name a few, that way I can make a point. So let me pause this and okay. So the very first lifetime, and this is before the physical incarnation, it was an entity known as Annulus, and so it was the first expression of the divine mind, the Logos, the Christ soul before his incarnation into a physical body, corresponding to Genesis. And many of you that study Genesis, know what the Logos is and understand what that means. So, and it goes on to say, the entity that Casey described, living in this lost civilization of Atlantis, who redirected the process of human evolution by creating a more appropriate physical form or the influx of souls to incarnate into, rather than incarnating into the ape-like human form which souls had entangled themselves into. And what they're saying is that many different souls came in. The Christ soul was a soul group, okay? So it was many different souls that came in, and so they followed everything that soul did. And so all the sins and everything that were, the karma that was created during those lifetimes and on that timeline were, they were all basically, kind of deemed, not pure, because they all were a part of the original sin, if that makes sense. So, and you'll hear a lot about that, like with Cain and Abel, and if you've watched the movie Noah, they talk about, it was Cain's bloodline that was basically ruined, and so it's kind of like what they're saying. So, and just think like that, when you say the first expression of the divine mind, well, if God's going to create everybody, it's got to have room for error, and you can't just expect it to be perfect. No one ever becomes perfect overnight. Nothing, you don't achieve perfection without, experience and doing it and learning and training. And so that makes perfect sense to me personally, because why would it be that quick? Why would you have one lifetime to get it right? And so for me, in my knowing and belief system, and notice I said both because this is what I know to be true, is that, the church basically, wherever they got their information, or for whatever reason that they set this up or why they did this that way, to me it's to control people through fear. They told them you got to get it right this time and blah, blah, blah. But, that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't resonate. Like, how could you believe that? But, if you are, when you're a child, if you start your training, very early, you can be programmed easily. And, like some of the best martial artists in the world are people that, started training when they were a kid, because they were, their mind was like a sponge. So they were easily controlled. And so they become the greatest masters in the beliefs that the belief systems that are basically bestowed upon them during their training, that it stays with them for life, and of course they evolve and they change and they take away from, whatever as they learn more. That's why meditation is so important, because if you walk through this life and you're just in your ego, you're only going to believe, you're never going to be open. Meditation is going to open your mind so that you can basically reprogram yourself, and you're not stuck in those same patterns that, that the limited information that your family gave you, And a lot of people do that. They're taught certain things as a kid, and they believe that wholeheartedly. And if it's religion, they believe that, and there's no other room for it. Me personally, I've always been open-minded, So I'm open for new knowledge, and a lot of the stuff I heard when I was a kid did not resonate with me, but this stuff does. It makes too much sense. So, so then the second lifetime was Adam. That was the first son of man and the son of God, the Christ soul after his incarnation into a physical body corresponding to Genesis. Most are familiar with that. And then you have Enoch. That was the second incarnation of the Christ soul. Um, most people know who Enoch is. The Hermes, which was an Egyptian god that was worshipped. And so if you look at the pattern between all these people that I'm mentioning throughout history, they were all profound teachers and very spiritual people. So it makes sense why all this information would be accurate, especially from someone that's, most of all the readings made so much sense and were accurate. To me, it's quite profound to predict your own death, or with him and how he predicted his own death. He was warned because he was doing so many readings, and the source in which he got his information from told him that he needs to slow down and stop. And I'm talking about Casey in regards to not Jesus but Casey, and he didn't listen, and so eventually he had a stroke, but it was still accurate information. It was correct. It happened. So Hermes was also known as Thoth and was the architect of the Great Pyramid. Now, earlier in the video, you heard me mention the Great Pyramid and how that has to do with the levels that you climb to achieve the Christhood. So that's not a coincidence, And he was also the sage who began the Hermetic tradition. And then there's other lifetimes like Joseph. Joseph was the son of Jacob, who became the prince of Egypt. Joshua, which was the warrior who led the Israelites into the promised land. And you see how all this corresponds with Egypt? And there's books that talk about the lost lifetime, or the lost times of Jesus. And they talk about how he studied in all these different places. And it would make sense because there was so much information, that if you read some of the current information that has been suppressed by the church and other people, there's people that it will add up with this information, step by step, if you're willing to look, if you have that interest. Not a lot of people do, but it's fine. So some of these people I've never, I've read this before, but I've never actually heard of them in history. There was another one, can't pronounce this name, but it was the musical director and seer who served under David and Solomon. So again, biblical names, and it shows you again how everything's connected. And then you have another guy was the high priest and helped organize the return from exile and the rebuilding of the temple, which was the Temple of Solomon, and recounted the books of Azara and can't say it, and who is claimed by Casey to have compiled and translated the books of the Bible. So again, another connection. And then there was one incarnation, a guy named Zen, Zen, Z-E-N, also known as Zan, Sin, S-E-N, or S-A-N, was the father of Zoroaster, who wrote the Zen Avatus and founded the religion of Zoroastrianism. I can't even say these words, so laugh if you want to, but it's not about being perfect. So then Jesus, the lifetime of Jesus, was the man who attained complete at-one-ment at the divine human unity known as the Christ. So that would be basically, that's the Trinity. That's achieving the Trinity. And like I was telling you, you take your mind, which is left and right hemispheres, right and left brain of the hemispheres, and that basically explains duality. And so that's kind of what, it's kind of the mind of the soul and then the mind of man. And so throughout your life and throughout all these different lifetimes, you're constantly trying to balance that, that duality. And the only way to do that is to balance it with your heart and become one. And so when you achieve this oneness at one-ment, and people have mistranslated that word, because at one-ment breaks down, it originally looks like atonement. If you break down atonement, it spells out at one-ment. And what's interesting about that is you break it down in threes, like at, one, ment. That it's like those three words come together, and that's basically showing the oneness in the Christ, that the person has achieved Christ. So at one-ment. So that's basically what it is to achieve Christ. You're at one-ment with God and everything. You're living that way, And so, if you think if you think you're going to do that without meditation or working on yourself or energy work, it's not going to happen. All the people that basically, there's been many masters that have existed throughout history. And that's why all these stories sound the same. And another story that I think is profound with that is that the same story of like Jesus and Mary and all that, you can look back and see the same exact stories in all the ancient traditions before Christ even was existed. And I'm talking about BC. So that's not a coincidence either. All these things are prophesized, and these actually existed. They existed in different cultures. A lot of Christianity is basically Egyptian mythology, and it's the same stories. So there's truth in all mythology and legends and things like that. So the whole idea to achieve this is. Go over to some of these things to try to get you I'll give you the quotes that came from the actual readings. So it says, for the Master Jesus, even the Christ, is the pattern for every man in the earth. You notice they say in the earth and not on it. Whether he be whether he be a Gentile or Jew or Greek, for all have the pattern, whether they call on that name or not. But there is no other name given under heavenly whereby men may be saved from themselves. So, in order for you to save yourself from yourself, and think about that, because how many people are out here not living Christ-like or not spiritual, and you really look at them, they're destroying themselves. I know a few people myself that have no religion, they have nothing. No light at all. It's just they're engulfed in darkness. And they're destroying yourself. They're destroying yourself every single day, whether it's working too much, whether it's through drugs, whether it's through just their own selfish desires. It can be, addictions to sex. I mean, it never goes well. But, that's why it makes sense that you'd have to live all these different lifetimes to basically attain that one-ment, to understand, the wisdom and where you went wrong. And like for me, and some of the New Age people that, they talk about ascension and stuff like that, I don't see it as New Age because it's more of an ancient way, an ancient age, ancient information. But we all had a chance in a way to step our, from 2012 to 2017, we went through what is called a stellar gateway, and it allowed many of us to move higher and higher up the totem pole, or up the up the pyramid. And I was one of those people that was kind of called at that time to do that, to change. And I even remember my sister saying that at one time I was very Christ-like. I remember her saying that, but as the energy died down, and I've noticed this with even some of the people that are destroying themselves now with the energy, with the frequency being lower, even those people at that time, even though their vibration was lower, they were even more Christ-like at that time because there was so much energy coming on the planet, and now it's stepping up again, like with all these solar flares, and I'll do a video on that, solar flares and consciousness, but with all the energy that's coming in from space. Cosmic radiation, and remember how they said, and I can't tell you where this is in the Bible, but they talk about the world being transformed by fire. That's what solar radiation is. It's fire. The sun is fire. It represents the element of light, fire, however you want to look at it. Like, a lot of people will associate fire with light. And so it's being transformed through the solar flares and the CMEs, and then every once in a while you'll see people on Facebook or social media, and they will say, they will talk about how the CME or the solar flare is going to wipe out all of our electronics, and that's what they focus on, is the fear of that. And understandably, I get that, but it's not what it's about. It's about transforming us and making us better. Better than what we were. For so many years we lived in darkness, and that's also what is known by the Golden Age. Even though when you look around, depending on what frequency you're in and how you see the world, there's still a whole lot of good things happening on the planet. But there's a lot of things that people are going through this massive awakening, and the ones that don't are the ones that are basically being exited from the planet. A lot of people talk about ascension and they think that they're going to go off planet somewhere, and it's not what it's about. It's about raising your frequency. So that's why I'm compelled to do DNA activations and J cell removals and things like that, so that you can attain your Christ light, your Christhood. And it really does help. If you do the work, you actually see the results. It's very painful though, because having to separate yourself from society and all the people that you once knew, basically going against you, because once you start achieving and embodying all that light basically it aggravates their demons. It aggravates those people because they see you change, and they, sometimes they get jealous. Sometimes they don't even know why they act the way they act. Sometimes I don't even think they're conscious of it. They're just so engulfed into the darkness. So that's, for anybody that wonders why I have, basically, cut people off and live in solitude, that's why, because they're just, I'm meant to do different things, and this is, I feel much better doing this as opposed to going out and drinking with friends and reminiscing on the past. I mean, this is much more profound at the end of the day, and it's much more fulfilling to me in every way. So just know that's what it's about. It's about the Christ pattern in every person, every soul, not person, because the person is just the shell or the temple. But it is definitely, every soul it's going to do this eventually. They're eventually going to climb up the pyramid, into the capstone and achieve the one Lord God. There's many already doing that. And one thing that I've noticed, if you watch any of the movies created, to depict the story of Jesus, Jesus Christ, he's being ridiculed, he's being spit on, people are trying to crucify him, or however you want to look at it. A lot of this stuff is metaphorical and it's symbolism, but I can honestly say that myself, that I can relate, and I'm not saying I'm Christ, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that with it being, with everybody attaining this or having the ability to attain it, the stories are very similar. You start evolving, you start changing, you start going towards the light, and the darkness kind of tries to hold you back and keep you pinned into where you are. And so that's why one reason you have to either be around people that are like-minded and are actually doing the same thing as you are, or you have to kind of go your own separate way. Otherwise, you're just going to be, miserable. I mean, you're more like the people that you're around. So if you're trying to, teach peace and things like that, and a new way of living, and creating the new earth, if you want to call it that. If you've got all these naysayers around you and they're trying to see you how you were in your darkness, or who you used to be, and they can't see beyond that, then you're not going to be able to exist with them. So it's very painful. I feel like anybody that goes through this process or goes through ascension can relate in regards to that. So another quote that comes from these readings is basically it's saying, regardless of the individual's religions or personal beliefs, this Christ pattern exists in the potential upon the very fiber of everyone's being. It is that part of each of us that is the perfect accord with the Creator and is simply wanting to find expression in our own lives. And so that's why I say that in the beginning in the beginning of the video I was talking about how people that are doing really good are the ones that are creating. That's because they are creating their expression, and they're sharing it with everyone else. And that's why those people do good, it's because they're basically supported by God, the Creator, because that's what you are. You're here to co-create with the Creator, and everything, can be an example of creation. This is creation. Everything is. Me speaking is creation. This video, just every conversation you have, every thought you have is a form of creation. So it's so much deeper than so many people put it or believe it to be. So, and then, it says, this Christ pattern was further described as the awareness within each soul imprinted in the pattern on the mind and wanting to be awakened by the will of the soul's oneness with God. And so that's what is basically what it's talking about when it comes to a spiritual awakening. It's on a soul level. So, that's why I said in my last video, I was talking about you have very little as far as free will when it comes to about 10%. And that's my own, spin on it. Because when the soul wants to awaken, it will. And it doesn't matter what your ego wants, it will override it, hit the override button, override switch, and you have no choice but to go with it or be destroyed. And, and it'd be through your own hand that you're destroying your own thoughts. So you can suppress it if you want, but it's going to be there waiting for you. And for the ones that don't do the meditation, that are into this, that resonate with the ascension and spirituality, just listening to a few little words and peaceful comments and podcasts, that's not going to get you there. You got to do the work. I've said that before. There is no short stops to this. There is no cutting corners. You got to go through the pain. And that's what it's about. That's what gets you there. Once you get tired of dealing with that pain, life after life after life, eventually you will come out of it. And it's all about, it's all about triumphing over the flesh. It's the thing. Your desires, your fleshly desires, your animalistic desires, you have to overcome that. And once you embody your higher self, your Christ energy, eventually it'll be just like anyone else that's, think of it as someone that used to be a horrible drug addict, and then they just started denying, stopped listening to their desires and their lower self, and they become much more, or they become what they were meant to be. That's because they, in a sense, became Christ-like and overcame those desires, and that's an example of attaining Christ consciousness. Not that you would be fully living in perfection or at one with God, if you however you want to call it, whatever you want to call it. But it'd be one step that you made to do that. And if you come back in the next lifetime, you may decide, you may be like, well, I don't want to experience that anymore. So this time I'm going to be a counselor. I'm going to be totally against it, or I'm going to become a cop and in battle against drugs, or whatever it is that in the previous lifetime that kept you away from God, that caused the complete separation of oneness. So let's see. All right, so one thing on here they were talking about when this involves the second coming of Christ. It's just like when they talk about, and I've said this in a couple of Facebook groups, they talk about this this solar flash that's coming. All it does for you to watch this video and actually watch it this long is that you're basically waiting on an event to happen, and it's keeping you from being in the present moment. And that is the same, I guess, principle, or the same, basically the same thing that caused, the Christians to be waiting on the second coming. Because you're waiting on this event, and you're not happy with what's happening now. If each and every day you make a decision to live a certain way, or make a decision that is going to get you, to that place of peace, each day can be considered a notch, in your journey, or a notch in your belt. But if you're just waiting on this thing to awaken everybody else, it's not about that. It starts with, within you. You can, you're worried about what everybody else is doing, and you think this magical thing's going to happen, and I mean, it is happening. It's a gradual event. It's happening every second, every minute, every day. You know, we've had a lot of solar flares in the past few weeks that just come in constantly, you know, and how you know that, you know, headaches, ears ringing, you might, when they come in, you might notice that, depending on what frequency and vibration you're in, you might notice that on those days you're more into your lower self. You know, you might, you know, if you're addicted to drugs, you might find yourself craving more of that to numb out these energies because you don't want to deal with it. You know, that's fine. You know, I've seen a lot of people do that. They'll drink more heavily on those days or those weeks when those energies are coming in because they're not meant to change, you know, evolve or ascend. They're meant to stay where they're at because they're supposed to, in a sense, you know, act as a catalyst for these other people going through this process, you know, to evolve. You know, and through that they'll learn, and you know, eventually it'll be their turn, you know, to go through the same thing in you know, in the next lifetime or a few lifetimes after that. Not everybody is supposed to do the same thing, and no one is being left behind. Everything is on a soul level. It's a choice. That's why I tell you know, my thing about the whole thing about the free will. You know, on a human level, I don't believe we have free will. I believe the free will is basically on the soul level, and we choose that before we come here. And a lot of people are not going to agree with that, especially in the month of February, because the majority of the month of February is an Aquarius month, and anyone that knows Aquarians, they believe what they believe, and they're not having anybody change their mind. So, being that we are in the energy of Aquarius this month, a lot of people are going to be governed by that energy and feel that way. So this video will probably be frowned upon by many people during the month of February, and you know, it might actually, you know, as we move into the other energies of the planets, people might be more, you know, in tune to it, or it might resonate with them later on. So on the second coming, because I keep going on tangents, but you know, it's all relevant. When it comes to the second coming, according to Edgar Casey's interpretations of the second coming of Christ, he was talking about it coming in as an energy. So it's the second coming of Christ, not of Jesus. Jesus doesn't come back because that was his last lifetime. He evolved out of the, he basically evolved from the point of needing to come back because his karma was balanced with his ascension, you know, with his crucifixion. And I don't mean necessarily a literal event of being nailed to a cross. You know, I see that as more metaphorical, of having a cross to bear, or you know, the death of the ego, you know, things like that. You know, with the death of the ego, if the ego dies and you become, and all the selflessness is drained out of you, then it would make sense for you to be in perfect at-one-ment with God, because then you would just be Christ-like. And if you ever look at children that are really like children that are really pure and really creative, that gives you an example of Christhood too, because before their ego develops, they are very pure, and they're very innocent, and they're creators. They're the ultimate creators. They have, you know, all this imagination, which is really, they're telling you the truth, especially the ones that say that they have, you know, imaginary friends. A lot of times that's their spirit guides or their deceased ancestors that are with them to guide them as children, you know, to help them with the, you know, a new start on life. But it was the periods from 58 to 98 when the Christ pattern would start to return. And so we have seen, you know, symptoms or similarities of that happening. For me, 99 is when I started going through my ascension process. So I went through a lot of purging, a lot of darkness, and in a sense, this whole life for me has been a purging of darkness, because I've always been different from everyone around me. And so, you know, the outcast, the person that didn't fit in, wanted something better for myself. And even when I was in my darkest moments, I know I was truly lost, but I was still this pure innocent person inside, just trying, lost, trying to find their way. And I would imagine that it's like this for anybody, for other people that can relate. I've talked to other people on the ascension path and on the journey, and especially the twin flame journey, and it's almost identical for the ones that are actually going through it and not, either, not lying or, basically in an illusion. So basically the period's from 58 to 98, and and it says that's when you will see his light will be seen in the clouds. So again, and I've said this on in regards to astrology. So in astrology, the sun, and I'm talking about SUN, the sun in the sky, is known as masculine energy. So there's a reason why when they're talking about the light, they call it his. So it's not so much as the gender, it's his, meaning masculine energy. So if you watch people go to work, like get up, they're on a 9 to 5 schedule or on a 3D schedule, most people that are moving in the daylight are succeeding. They're more creative. They're out here creating, and then you have certain people like moon people, which is kind of like what I am. I'm a little bit of both, but I'm more active at night, and I'm more in tune with the subconscious energies and the subconscious influence and the emotional aspects, as opposed to getting up every day with the sun and going to bed at night. I mean, to me, that's definitely the way to live, because all your stuff is balanced. But the deep thinkers, the people that are restless at night, that don't go to bed at 3 o'clock in the morning, things like that, there's a lot of profound wisdom and information that comes out. And people that are on the schedules are the ones doing the regular, they're the ones having the kids, they're the ones, creating that experience. And the ones that are usually to themselves and things like that are out at night. There's that old, saying about nothing good happens after 10 o'clock at night. And for the most part, a lot of that's true. But I walk at night, and I find it very peaceful, and I'm not up to anything. I'm just doing me, and that's when I find that I connect and I'm the most active. So anyway, Casey gave the year of the entrance of the Messiah into the period of 1998. He also mentions that no one knows the exact day of event, because it cannot occur until his enemies and the earth are wholly in subjection to his will, his power. So this suggests that Jesus' return will not be a future incarnation into the flesh, since Jesus has already transcended the need to reincarnate. And that's what it's about. It's about balancing the original karma, the original sin from the beginning, when we all came in and basically went, rampant, and created all the darkness in this world. So that's basically my perspective on their perspective of what's happening. And something else I wanted to talk to, included in this video, is about the rapture. The rapture is, it's basically a changing in vibrations. So when you've heard the stories of the rapture, they'll say that your friend will be beside you or whatever, and then you'll look up and they'll be gone. That's what it's like, because through the ascension process, or the raising of vibrations, you move at a very fast rate, at a rapid rate, and your cells and everything never rest. I mean, everything is always moving, always vibrating. So just imagine that being sped up by the light coming in, so much light coming in to the point where you're moving so fast that you are not seen anymore. And that's why people that are not where you're at on the ascension process, that's why they are basically either rejected from your lives, ejected from your lives. Either you reject them, or they're ejected, or they reject you, because you no longer resonate. And as you start encompassing more of this light, pulling more of this energy in, eventually they won't see you anymore. regardless if you look at it like, as them disappearing or not. But I mean, it makes sense when you think about the metaphor of looking up and your friend being gone. Well, if you are so, basically into the materialistic world and governed by that, you can see how that could happen, because one minute you're buying this car and fixing it up and messing with these women, the next minute your friend or the person that you knew for however long is no longer around. And then you're over trying to, find out, figure out like what happened, why did they leave? And it's because you weren't understanding where they were vibrationally. So, it's quantum physics teaches us that two different vibrations cannot exist in the same place. It's not going to work. So it's going to end in catastrophe or chaos or something. They're going to be, they're basically polar opposites, and they're just, the polarity is not going to work. It's going to be like two opposites in, opposite end of a magnet trying to put them together, and you just can't. It doesn't work. So if you're on this ascension path and you've noticed these people dropping out, or you've noticed yourself changing and you can't relate to them anymore, that's what's happening. So I invite you to do your own research. This is just my perspective and how I see it, and basically, I have to give credit to Edgar Casey and all those readings, but and all that information. But that's kind of where I'm at with this, and this is metaphysics, and that's my perspective. Thank you for watching.